Hey everybody, this is Catherine Engelbrecht, and welcome to this week's edition of Red, White, and True News, where we talk about all things exciting, glamorous, and elections. Oh yes, and what could be more scintillating than yet another conversation about mail-in ballots? But buckle up, folks, because that's what you're in store for. 30 more minutes of talking about what we can do to try and salvage the upcoming election and the mountain of mail that's going to be headed to a county near you. All right. Thinking about what we could call this episode, and in light of sort of the events of the past few days, I'm calling on all of my Game of Thrones fans, my fellow fans out there, that may remember Season 1, Ned Stark, House of Stark. His commonly repeated refrain was, "Winter is coming." And Ned would say this to his family, he would say this to his community, and he would say it as a way of imparting that winter must be prepared for. Winter is coming. Bad things will happen if we do not prepare. And so I'm going to put a slight little twist on that, little electoral twist, and say, my friends, November is coming. November is coming. And the sun will rise and the sun will set, and we can continue to tweet and Facebook and wring our hands and worry that the sky is falling. But if we don't take actionable, strategic steps to reclaim our time and to make sure that our votes count and are counted, all of us, mind you, another little sidebar timeout. It doesn't matter if you're voting Republican, if you're voting Democrat, your vote should count and be counted. And the processes that are being set up across the country right now in varying stages of disarray are not in favor of the voter. That's my concern. We need to have a free and fair process for all voters. That's the way this must work in order for our republic to continue. So we've got to preserve this process. So November is coming. Be forewarned and forearmed with good solutions that we can help in our own local elections in our own counties to lessen the burden of some of this nightmare that is continuing to, as we say, continuing to reveal itself. All right. So 3 articles that I picked out that I wanted to kind of kick things off with that show, I think, some of the cautionary tale that this season has turned into. First is an article that was on Fox News. The headline is, Trump, in an interview, warns it could take years to get election results with mass-mailed ballots. Years. Do we think that that's really possible? It could take years? Yeah, it kind of is. It kind of is. Having been up close and personal with what it really looks like on the sort of, like a saying like, if you eat sausage, you don't necessarily want to see how the sausage is made. Well, I've spent a lot of time in the sausage factory seeing how sausage is made. And let me tell you, in election world, counting ballots, the paper shuffle that comes with just a standard, just a more normal, I guess, election is confusing enough. Now you get into the general election of 2020, the battle royale of all elections, and we inject all of this mail-in ballot monsoon. It's hard to adequately explain because there are, so many well-intentioned, service-oriented, good-hearted Americans who are working in these processes. They're ill-equipped. It's too much. And so they're going to be sitting on these, mountains of paper that they can't get through. And over time, over the days and the weeks and the months that it's going to take to get to the bottom of the stack, along the way, you lose the accuracy of the process and the integrity of the process and the security of the process. And then, of course, then the lawyers are going to jump into this and you're going to have this played out in court. So is it possible that it could take years? I certainly hope not. I certainly hope for the best. I certainly hope, frankly, that none of what I'm saying actually happens and things go swimmingly on November 3rd and we all pop popcorn and we see who wins on election night and life goes on about its merry way. I don't think that's what's going to happen because winter is coming. But this article goes on to really explain, the fact that the infrastructure is not there. And I think the reason I picked this article, honestly, is just the headline, that it could take years. That is just like that's a lot. That's a lot. And that starts to kick in all other areas of concern to think about what it might mean to have that much vagary and lingering confusion over an election. So let's hope for the best. Let's hope that doesn't occur. But nonetheless, caught my attention in the headline. Okay, the next one up, another headline, attention grabber. This was in yesterday's New York Post. And this article says over 80,000 mail-in ballots disqualified in New York City primary mess. The mail-in ballots of more than 84,000 New York City Democrats who sought to vote in the presidential primary were disqualified. 21%. 25%, this gets some stats here real quick. 25% of elections are decided by approximately 2% spread between the candidates. 25% of elections are decided by contests that are plus or minus 2% between the top two candidates. This election tossed 21% of the votes. Why? Because they came in either there was a question about the postmark, or the voter made a mistake, or some other element of the application didn't comport with the standard. This, again, is what happens when you try to turn a long-standing process of voting in person, turn that on its head, flip the script, and now just tell everybody, oh, figure it out, vote by mail. It'll be super easy. Just send it in. It's so super convenient. No, it's not. 21% of the vote, New York City Democrats didn't get to vote. That is wrong, wrong, wrong. Then we have this headline from the Free Beacon, and the headline is that the United States government puts a $10 million bounty on 2020 election hackers. And the article goes on to talk about how anybody that has information leading to foreign interference, or I imagine interference broadly, by hackers, there would be a bounty available for that finding. And you know what? I think that the sentinel effect alone there is significant, and it talks about or shares, I think, that the administration is serious. They want to know. They want to know if you know about things that are happening. In the reality, this election will in many ways decide whether or not America continues to be that shining city on a hill, continues to be the leader of the free world. And $10 million may not be enough for to get people to talk about the undercurrent. If there's an undercurrent, maybe there's not. Time will tell. But I do think it's great to see that conversations are being started, and I think that in these next 90 days, we're going to become a lot more aware of all of the ways that we should be on alert for this process and for everything we can do to preserve the integrity and the legitimacy of our votes individually and corporately. Okay, so those articles bring me to the bigger content for today, and that is what the heck happened in Nevada. So if you've been keeping up, you may have seen that a couple days ago, the Republican National Party, the Trump campaign, sued the state of Nevada because the state of Nevada over the weekend signed legislation, governor signed it into law, that changed the state into an all-male state with certain provisions that the plaintiffs have postured or make it untenable for an election to occur fairly in Nevada. Okay, here's the issue with Nevada, and something to think about. Again, getting back to November is coming. True the Vote actually sued the state of Nevada in April. And at the time we sued, it's important to note that the Secretary of States, most of you know this, Secretary of States in almost all states are the ultimate sign-off, the ultimate authority, the ultimate overseer, the ultimate administrator of a state's election process. And so they're the ones that are sort of on the hook for how an election is run. Well, in the state of Nevada, the Secretary of State is Republican. And so, which made us no difference, because what she did that we took her to task on many months ago was that she, with the stroke of a pen and by bureaucratic fiat, said, you know what, we're going to make this state all mail-in. And then the Democrats piled into that and said, oh, that's not enough. You need to send, not only do you need to send ballots to everybody, but we also need to remove signature provisions. And of course, you already don't have voter ID in the state, so we don't have to worry about that. But we need to have unlimited ballot harvesting and just by overall just a broadening of chaos. And so we jumped into that lawsuit, both at the federal level and at the state level, and tried to sound the alarm. This is a problem. This is a problem. This is a problem. Well, the feedback we received from just, I say feedback, the feedback you received just from communications coming back to us was, oh, it's the primary, don't worry. And in fact, the politicos just in the state, oh, it's the primary. This was all about a primary, don't worry, because they're not going to do this for the general. None of what's happening is going to concern the general election, which made us think, clearly this is all about the general. All of this is about the general. History will tell the tale, but you must question how much of everything that we're going through as a country is about the general election. How much of this is being conjured broadly, all about the general election. Nevada was no different back in April, putting rules in place that were all about the general election, but under this fog of, oh, no, it's just for the primary. Well, lo and behold, it wasn't. And so after they had a calamitous primary, nobody did anything until the legislature met and duly voted to adopt these changes. The governor signed it into law. And then the RNC jumped in. So, I don't want to get too deep off in the weeds. I am not an attorney. I represent, aggrieved voters with a hearty dose of common sense who look at this stuff and say, wait, what, really? Does this really sound like this should be the way moving forward, that you had a state that previous to 2020 was voting about 20% by mail, and we're just going to flip that and turn it all mail, and that's going to work? So when we filed suit back in April, we did so citing case law time and again about the implication and the impact of removing safeguards that would prevent fraudulent votes and that would dilute legal votes. We talked about their plan violating the right to vote under the Purcell principle, which again back in April seemed a little more relevant, but even then it was talking about that the closer you come to an election, that giving orders affecting those elections, especially conflicting orders, I'm reading now from our brief, especially conflicting orders, can themselves result in voter confusion and consequent incentive to remain away from the polls. And as an election draws closer, that risk will increase. November is coming. Right now, there are 70 some odd lawsuits littered about the country, primarily at the hand of the Democrat parties, where they are trying to do what I would characterize as just expanding the chaos by forcing mail-in ballots, by removing signature comparison or limiting signature comparison provisions, by trying to strike down voter ID, by trying to engage in unlimited vote harvesting. And that's being forced both by lawsuits and also by, like it was in Nevada, by bureaucratic fiat, where an elected official, be it the governor, be it the Secretary of State in this instance, just say this is the way it's going to be. Now that fiat piece is unconstitutional, and that really was the basis of our argument back in the spring, which was that the plan violated the manner of election as chosen by the legislature. And that is part of the Constitution. The times, places, and manners of holding elections are prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. So here's potentially the trouble in Nevada is that the legislature did their bit. They came together, they voted, the governor signed it. So, look, again, I'm no attorney, and I've read the brief that's been recently filed by the RNC, and I certainly, for the benefit of all Nevadan voters, for the benefit of Republicans and Democrats alike, I hope that this lawsuit is successful in peeling back this push towards mail and in encouraging in-person voting, because I have said it before, and I will say it again, the safest, most secure, most accurate, most fail-safe way to cast your vote is in person on Election Day. Period. That's a fact. That is the best way to cast your ballot. And so we need to continue to encourage that method of voting. But the other provisions that were wrapped into all of this, the signature verification problems, the fact that, again, the state doesn't have voter ID, so you couple that with mail-in, the problems are obvious. I will say that the brief goes on to talk and cite things that did happen in the primary, where, let me see if I can grab to one just super quick here, a line that I particularly read, or particularly enjoyed, I guess. Maybe enjoyed's not the right word, because I don't enjoy it. It's just like, this is an example. Talking about, this was referencing many news articles that came up after the primary. Photographic evidence surfaced of ballots tossed in trash cans and littering apartment mailbox areas. One Clark County voter found about a dozen ballots just pinned to the complex's bulletin board, sticking out of mailboxes, sitting by garbage cans. The problem that this highlights is that voter rolls are bad. So again, if we would have had time to prepare, or maybe had taken more seriously in previous cycles the standard of voter roll maintenance that should be adhered to, but it's not lost, shouldn't be lost on anybody, that the same groups that are now suing to force mail-in mass mail ballots and suing to remove signature verifications and allow vote harvesting and so forth, those are many of the same groups that previous to this cycle were suing states to prevent them from cleaning their voter rolls. So there you go. Now we have this messy situation where the only option you have because of timing is to get all those mail ballots out, and they're going to end up just like this brief talks about, just strewn about because the people don't live there anymore, because they haven't lived there for years. We get these comments back to True the Vote all the time. People saying, I just got a handful of ballots delivered to me. What do I do? Which is another issue. What do you do? Because time is short. How can you make sure that your vote counts and is counted in the midst of such uncertainty? Okay, so let me lay out the facts then look, Godspeed in Nevada. I pray that this lawsuit goes well for all Nevadans. It will be of huge consequence to the overall integrity of the process if they can get to a place where a more normalized set of circumstances kind of takes the field here. But, don't forget that Secretary of State was a Republican, is a Republican, and she is the one that started these dominoes falling in that state. I have some more articles here, gang. It's fascinating. I think it's maybe it's double think. I don't know if it really qualifies as cognitive dissonance. It's more of sort of a double think thing. I think that a lot of the far left seems to be able to, with a straight face, tell you that there's no problem with mail-in, yet article upon article, some of which we've already covered today, belie that fact. Stat upon stat tells us this is This is bad for all Americans. Here's another, this is just recently out from NPR, a table where they were tracking, this is back in, I guess, early July, so it doesn't have some of the stats yet, some of the real dumpster fires, like what was happening in New York City and in New Jersey, where 1 in 5 ballots was cast out as being fraudulent. But this is just a table that talks about mail ballot rejection rates for the 2020 presidential primaries. In Virginia, they tossed out 67,565 ballots, so 5.63%. In Arkansas, they tossed out 4,507. In Oklahoma, they tossed out 24,738. In Rhode Island, I'm so sorry. Yikes. That's not right. Those are the total mail-in ballots. So it's funny when you can't even tell the difference in the stats, because these are actual numbers you're hearing reported, like in New York where they just tossed out 84,000. So okay, let me revise the explanation of this table. In Virginia, they rejected so I didn't do the math on this. Okay, so in Virginia they rejected 5.63%. In Arkansas they rejected 3.2%. In Oklahoma 3.1%. Going back to previous stat that 25% of elections are decided by plus or minus 2 percentage points, just the rejection of ballots just on the basis that they arrived late could be the deciding factor. Voters didn't have a hand in that. They did their best to get the ballots back in a timely manner, and they were bounced because they didn't receive, or they weren't brought in time. That's just one way that mail-in ballots could be eliminated from the count, and it's unfair to everybody. You also hear a lot of the left talking about, there's already states that vote by mail and they do it. It's just great. It's wonderful, and there's no problems. And they cite a lot of times they'll talk. Well, here are the states. There's 5 states that are currently doing all mail. There's Colorado, Hawaii, Oregon, Washington, and Utah. Of late, we've gotten a lot of mails specifically about Oregon, talking about what a great process Oregon has. It's been and it shouldn't be lost on anyone that Oregon has voted by mail for, I think, almost a decade and over a decade that they voted by mail. And it wasn't easy when they first started. They had a lot of kinks to work out, and now they have a process that, is cycle after cycle all mail. But here's what I can tell you about what happens in Oregon by virtue, and I can tell you this by virtue of True the Vote volunteers who report this back. The standards, the code has been written in Oregon in such a way that citizens are kept at arm's length from the ability to examine documents. And so even though the headline or the subhead of the article I'm referring to here, which was in the LA Times, this is from Amber McReynolds of the National Vote at Home Institute, had gone on record here saying, with well over 50 million ballots cast in Oregon, there have only been 2 fraud cases verifiable enough to result in convictions for mail ballot fraud in 20 years. Okay. This falls under the category, if you don't want the answer, you don't ask the question. They don't let citizens look at many of the very exhibits, many of the documents that would be necessary to try and put together a case. And, why would it fall to citizens, to concerned citizens? Because they don't have the infrastructure within their own state to take a closer look. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, you don't think there's a problem, so you don't look for problems, but you also can't see problems because they're untraceable. So you can only you have to begin with what's happening on the ground, listening to voters, as we try to do, who tell you, well, I got more than one ballot. I wasn't able to volunteer to watch the ballots being cast, and I'm concerned about what's happening when nobody's watching, which is common sense. I mean, our government is stem to stern littered with corruption. So the notion that this process, which decides who gets to hold the purse strings, right? Who gets to have the seats of power? That this process, somehow everybody would don their angel halos and nobody would attempt to exploit the myriad weaknesses that are so crystal clear. In fact, next week's podcast, check that one out. 5 common ways to steal an election. Look for that one. That's going to be a fun conversation because we're going to break it down. How do you do this and how do you get away with it? Fun conversation to have. What's the point of all of this, my friends? The point of it is it's really critical that you think critically about mail ballots as a part of a broken process. Try to get past, if you can, the perceived convenience about, it comes in the mail and I vote it and then I send it back and look how great and easy that was. There's a lot more that happens behind the scenes that is not going to be broadcast if they can help it. All of the ugliness, all of the calamity, all of the failure of process is just going to be minimized in the eyes of the public. Because why, other than investigative journalists and concerned citizens, why would you take this on? Of course, notwithstanding campaigns and candidates who have clearly their own motivations for trying to get, all of their ballots cast. I say it before, I say it again. Our greater concern is what this really means to the voters, because at some point, this process becomes such a farce that at some point voters just shrug their shoulders and say, forget it. It doesn't. I checked my mail today and I got like a dozen ballots. Or I checked my mail today and I still haven't gotten the ballot that I requested. Or I checked my mail and I got my ballot, but I kind of made a mistake when I voted and I don't know if it's going to count or not. So I don't know. It doesn't even matter. I mean, that's really where we are headed, and we cannot allow that to set in because it's too important. Our voice is too important. So some takeaway points here, and getting to now questions that are asked, that have been asked. So we sent out a letter yesterday, and we talked a little bit about the Nevada case and why what was happening in Nevada could so easily happen in any state, right? Because the mold is being cast, and once those that would look to subvert the process figure out, how to curate that argument, then they can just take that and stamp that out across the country with very little resistance, because they have case law in Nevada that they know works. So this is a critical case that you keep your eyes on to see what comes from it, and continue to speak out about the importance of holding the line in Nevada. But the situation being what it is, here are some things to think about with respect to mail ballots. And again, basing this on feedback that we got from yesterday's letter that we sent. True the Vote is not against mail ballots that are requested by the voter. That's not a problem. Absentee votes are not a problem. It is only when they are mailed out en masse that we get to be more concerned. Vote harvesters, that's a big problem. The fact that there are voter rolls that are problematic in and of themselves is another problem, because you cannot be certain that the people who are receiving these ballots are actual legitimate voters who still live there, but yet those ballots are still live and free for voting, so you can't really get a solid count based upon accurate provision to a legitimate voter. And really, from a process standpoint, which is where True the Vote really digs in, you don't have enough people to manage this, so you're not going to get accurate counts. The safest way to vote is in person on election day. This is going to continue to be a common refrain. The safest way to vote is in person on election day. So keep your eyes out for these headlines. We're going to talk about it more, although next week I look forward to changing the subject up a little bit, although this is clearly, on the top of everybody's mind. Get involved, volunteer, and Until we meet again, God bless each and every one of you, and God bless America. Over and out.